Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Genealogical Society of Santa Cruz County lecture series. This evening, we're presenting Keys to Obituary Research with guest speaker Junel Davidsen. This webinar will be recorded. To join this event using a telephone only, dial any of the following numbers: 1-888-788-0099 or 1-833-548-0282. Slowly enter the webinar ID of 991-1743-4407, and then the passcode is 2021-0406. As an attendee, your microphone is muted for the entire presentation. We are not taking open mic comments. However, you do not need a microphone, camera, or a screen if you only want to listen, because this event is accessible by landline or mobile phone. We are taking questions, though. If you're joining by computer, you may use the Q&A feature to type your comments. On the Zoom control bar, near the bottom of the screen, you'll see the Q&A icon. In the lower left corner on the Zoom control bar, you'll see some audio settings, and then you'll see the Q&A icon. That's where you'll click and then type in your question. And then over in the lower right corner, you'll see Leave in a red rectangle. If you're joining this event using a mobile device, the Q&A icon likely appears near the top right corner of the screen, so everything is shown in reverse. In the upper left corner, you'll see Leave Meeting in red letters, and then in the upper right corner, you'll see that Q&A icon. I'll now turn it over to Gail Burke, who will introduce our program. Gail, over to you.
Good evening. We're glad to see all of you here for tonight's program. This program is presented in partnership with the Santa Cruz Public Libraries on the library's Zoom webinar platform. And thank you to library staff members Sarah Jones, Victor Willis, and Jessica Goodman for your assistance. Since this is the 50-year anniversary of the Genealogical Society, we are highlighting details of the early history of our society as we celebrate this milestone event. During the first 5 years after the founding of the Genealogical Society of Santa Cruz County in 1971, the focus of the organization was on the growth of the society and promoting awareness of the value of genealogy. John Ballard, the energetic founder behind the establishment of our society, worked to include diverse population membership by contacting various religious groups, fraternal organizations, and other genealogical organizations, not just here locally, but around the country. He even approached the federal government and President Richard Nixon. Ballard worked tirelessly not only to expand interest in genealogy, but also to preserve cemeteries and tombstones from falling into disrepair or falling victim to development, and to safeguard historical sites and records. The Society has accumulated a record of some of these efforts and events in the Society's history binders. When the Santa Cruz Public Library downtown is able to reopen, we hope our members will enjoy exploring the early years of Society endeavors. In a letter to other genealogy groups in 1971, Mr. Ballard enthused, "We are going to show Mr. Joe Public that to do his genealogy is the in thing." And we at the Genealogical Society of Santa Cruz County think that doing genealogy is still the in thing. In a moment, I'll introduce tonight's speaker, but first I want to let you know about our upcoming programs. In May, Dr. Tracy Bliss will address the group about the history of the Evergreen Cemetery in Santa Cruz and how her research altered the mythology surrounding this local landmark. Our June program will feature local house historian Joe Michalak in partnership with Society member Annette Hagopian, as they explain what they discovered in researching the history of Miss Hagopian's Santa Cruz home. As a reminder, our Society's programs are on hiatus during the summer months of July and August, and we resume the first Tuesday of September. We are very pleased to be joined by Junel Davidsen this evening. Ms. Davidsen worked in the San Benito County Clerk Recorder's Office as Assistant Registrar of Voters of Monterey County. After retirement, she obtained an AA degree in Family Research Studies from Monterey Peninsula College and has been a board-certified genealogist for 13 years. She has attended several genealogy conferences and training workshops, most recently the Native American Research course in Salt Lake City. Junel has held various positions on the Monterey County Genealogical Society Board of Directors, including president. She volunteers at Monterey and San Benito County Historical Societies. Junel is a professional genealogist specializing in courthouse and next of kin research. She assists families in finding missing relatives and estate administrators in locating living next of kin. Tonight, we will learn how to get the most out of our obituary research. Junel will focus on both free and subscription websites where obituaries and death notices can be found, as well as strategies to maximize search results. She will show examples from various locations and time periods and explain how using a variety of search filters can enhance success. Junel will also provide tips on finding offline obituaries through local libraries. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Junel Davidsen.
Thank you, Gail. In this session, we will look at websites with newspapers and obituary sources. The website links and examples are in the handout that will be available later. I will cover several examples in my slide presentation. Some slides have arrows pointing to various things, which I hope will make it easier to follow. This is a great time to do obituary research because there are many images of newspapers online, as well as articles that are born digital. When I started genealogy, newspaper research required a trip to the library to view microfilm or contacting the area library for assistance. To some extent, that is still true, and we will cover some ideas about that at the end. An obituary is an article written about a deceased person, and it may contain biographical information, such as age at death or birth date, place of death or burial, place of birth, names of parents, including the mother's maiden name, the name of the spouse and in-laws, names of siblings, including step-siblings, names of children and other relatives, and life events, immigration, schools and churches attended, military services, hobbies, and so on. This would be the dream obituary, right? But sometimes we actually know some of that information, and we can use that information as our search terms also. This is the first website that we'll visit. I don't know if you're aware of it, but this is a really good website as a directory of links to other websites. And it's arranged by states, and it has all kinds of information, including death notices, wills and probate, cemetery burials, and obituaries. It is arranged by state, but some of the larger cities also have their own special page. Our example tonight is we're going to Michigan to do an obituary research. And I discovered that there was a collection of obituaries at Family Search. As you probably know, Family Search is the website of the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. And their website is free, and they have been digitizing images from microfilm and posting them online. And then volunteers are going afterwards and indexing various information. So we know that not all of the names have been indexed for the obituaries, but for this example, I did find what I was looking for. I clicked on the link and it brought me right to the search page at Family Search. And this is a collection. There's collections in other states as well. I'm going to simulate an online search since I'm doing a slide presentation. I can do a name search, or if the item is not indexed, you can actually browse through over 1 million images. Sounds overwhelming, but if you have the death date, then it shouldn't be too difficult. So I'm going to look for a Jack Johnson, who died in 1995. And you can open up the search boxes to put different various search criteria, such as, the date of death, as I did, the year here, and also other variable information. So when I click that, it's going to prompt me to sign in because I came directly from the Death Index's site, and apparently I hadn't been logged in for a couple of weeks, so it prompted me again to sign in. This website, if you've never used it, you need a username and a password, and you can register to get that login information. It doesn't cost anything, and you don't have to be an LDS church member to use this site. So here's the results for Jack Johnson, who died in 1995. He appeared right on top. And over to the right, you'll see a camera icon where the right arrow is pointing. That means that there is an image. You'll notice in the column where it says relationships that there's nothing entered. That is because the other people in the obituary have not been indexed yet. So apparently they're going through and just doing the name of the deceased person and then going back later. When I worked at the Family History Center in Seaside, there was a man that came in every Wednesday and did indexing. And he was very proud. He had thousands of obituaries that he had indexed. So sometimes less is more. If I had put in the names of all of the children or all of the, variable information, I may not have found the search result at the top. He might have been buried, literally items far below. So think about that when you're doing your searching. In your handout, you will see a graphic of the scrapbook page where I found this obituary. A lot of libraries have put together scrapbooks and clippings files that also include notices of wedding anniversaries and family reunions, sometimes graduations and other information. In Jack's obituary, we get his death date and his place of death, his wife's name, Judy, his son's name is Richard, his son's wife, and the names of 5 grandchildren. So here's a question. Are the grandchildren the children of the one son? Well, you probably know the answer to that. It does say that he is survived by these people, so it is possible that there was another son who was not mentioned. Some obituaries will kindly tell you that some family members were predeceased, but sometimes they don't, so we can't just assume, that that's all the family members there were. You'll notice it also gives residence locations, which is very handy if you want to do further research in public records. In the case of doing DNA research, maybe you want to contact some of those relatives. Here's a great website for doing obituary research and also for doing historical newspaper research. It has a list of newspapers by state, so you can also sign up to be alerted when new material is added. This website is approximately $79, $80 per year, which is fairly reasonable because they really have a lot of papers online. Back about 10 years ago, I was doing research in South Carolina, and at a very early date, I found a lot of death notices and probate records and things like that. So they do have some really early newspapers. What I'm going to show you next is an example of an early newspaper printed in 1782 in Boston, Massachusetts. And this is an example of an old newspaper with typeset characters, which are uneven and somewhat faded. We have to consider the condition of the original newspaper and what the computer can read, or what they say, what it says it can read. And it's not like human eyes that can actually read it. Generally, newspapers at these websites are not name indexed like we saw at Family Search. The search is dependent on optical character recognition to read the information. OCR stands for optical character recognition, and it's the type of technology that it's using to give you results. We also need to be familiar with the words used in an obituary and use those words in our searches. To find this article, I used the word guide as a keyword and in combination with the last name, because you'll notice that some of the letters are kind of run together, and at the bottom there you'll see the two F's in the word affections, and it looks like an F at the beginning of social life. We can read that, but would the computer be able to? Here's an updated list for Oregon as of July 2020. For the Oregonian that was published in Portland, Oregon from an early date, you'll notice at the bottom, this run begins 1861 through 1987 in the newspaper archive section of the website. Up top, you'll notice another entry, 1988 through current, in the obituaries section. When you're doing a search, be aware that there's those two sections, because sometimes it'll give you 0 results, and they'll look at the other section and there might be 25. So just be aware of that. In your handout, there's another example which shows papers from the Civil War era. And that is important because newspapers survived in many cases where the courthouse records may have burned during the Civil War. Here's the website, Genealogy Bank, their homepage, and you can do a search from here, or you can do an advanced search. You can also sign up for a 7-day free trial, and maybe you'll find your ancestors' information within those 7 days, and then you can cancel before you have to pay for a subscription. So going to the advanced search, which I like to do because it has a lot of options here. You have names, date ranges, you can enter in a keyword, you can exclude a keyword or keywords, you can filter by state or city or newspaper. This example is for a man named Quayak, who happened to be my second great grandmother's brother, an American Indian who lived he's actually born in Oregon Territory before it became Washington Territory. My distant cousin told me he found Quayak's obituary in the newspaper in a local library, so I thought I would check and see if I could find that online. And to my surprise, I found that his obituary was printed in papers all across the United States. Salt Lake City, Utah, Wichita, Kansas. And also you'll see on the left-hand side in Alabama. If you don't put in a location in your search, then it will give you the opportunity to filter by state, filter your results by state. So this is probably the obituary that my cousin found. Indian guy dies in Oregon, age 120. Probably the oldest Indian in the state of Washington, died at his home on the Satsup last week. No one knew his exact age, but he was said to be at least 120 years old, and all the old settlers here who had known him for more than 40 years are satisfied that he is at least that old. Well, we know that newspaper and obituary articles are secondary information. In other words, it didn't come from the person himself, but very interesting nonetheless. It goes on to talk about he was the most peaceful Indian. He was one of the most peaceful Indians that ever lived, and that he had had 3 wives. I have not been able to find any living descendants. Quack was a citizen with the right to vote and owned a home on the Sadsa. I never knew that he owned land, so I need to check that out. He wasn't in the Indian allotment list. So next trip to Washington, I guess I'm going to the recorder's office. So the results also showed something interesting, I thought. In one case, it didn't recognize, it eliminated the I, and in the other case, it eliminated the A in the word. So it gave me quack and quick in my results in case I wanted to check those out. That's kind of interesting, you know, must be a little, the search must be a little fuzzy in order to give me that, you know, flexibility. This is another great website for doing research in the more current obituary, in more current obituaries for people who have died more recently. They go back to about the 1990s, and they actually have a very good coverage of newspapers. And this subscription is around $50 per year. This has a very basic screen for searching. You only have the name and the event date and the keyword portion. It's really nothing fancy, but you can do a lot with it. For instance, I entered a woman's first name, the year of death, and the maiden surname, and believe it or not, I found her obituary that way. The following example involves a second cousin match I found at 23andMe. Her name was shown, and I sent her a message, but didn't get a response, and I couldn't find her in the People Finder websites that you probably all are aware of, Spokio and some of the others. So I entered her name in the keyword, only that, and found this obituary, which showed her mother's name as Lorraine Clegg. And if I read further, it also gives me Lorraine's name, her mother's name, Frida, and her father's name, Gustav Benson. So we actually have 3 generations in this one obituary, which I'm sure if you've done research on obituaries, you've probably seen obituaries that have as much information. And so I was able to, with this information, create a working tree, because this was the family of my mysterious grandfather. And so by entering in this information, I started getting hints and was able to put the family together. And later on, I found an even closer cousin. So that was great success with this website with just one name. Here's another website you're probably all aware of, at least you're, if you have an Ancestry.com subscription with the all access, you would have this as well. You can also subscribe to it individually. And sometimes in either of the subscriptions, you may get prompted to pay for an article. That is because newspapers.com has an agreement with some of the newspapers that they're not included with the regular subscription. So you have to sign up for the publisher's extra, and some areas you'll run into that in some areas. This website does not have the boxes like we saw at Family Search and also at Genealogy Bank. It has keyword searching, and it has filters for the years and the locations. So I actually had to experiment a little bit with this one to try and get my Mary Johnson, my dad's mother, to come up on top of the search results. I tried to do that to see, you know, what method works the best. So in this case, I put Mary Johnson, her name, in quotes. because I did not want all the instances of Mary and all the instances of Johnson to show up. I wanted Mary Johnson together. And she died in Medford. That's where she was living when she passed away. She died in 1977. And she was buried in Washington. She was actually born in Washington and was buried in Ocean Park. And I noticed that this newspaper was published in Longview, Washington, which is kind of in southern Washington, but a long ways from Medford, Oregon. And as I was reading it, it occurred to me that none of her children lived in Longview. My dad lived in Weaverville, California, and my uncle Frank lived in Orland, and the other two lived in Oregon and Washington. Olympia is in the state of Washington. And I just wondered, why was this obituary published in Longview, which is 80 miles away from the cemetery where she was buried? Well, I realized then by doing a little searching that this newspaper had a wide circulation, and they actually delivered to people in the area of Ocean Park and where she used to live. And so it reminded me that I always need to do a wider search, because some of the smaller newspapers are not online yet. They're coming, but they're not all there yet. So it was just a good reminder for me. A little practice. There's a couple of good features I'd like to share with you regarding newspapers.com. And that is, if you do a clipping, as I have done here, at the bottom of the clipping, you will see in fine print that you can open up the OCR to look at the text. That is the text that the computer read of this article. And you can actually copy that text and put it in your notes section of Ancestry.com, or you can put it in your family history program or your Word document, whatever how you're writing your family history. And so that's a pretty nifty feature. You can also unclick the public box to remove your name or your screen name, your identity on newspapers.com, because when you clip something, it will show you, with a little hat, your screen name. And if you actually have your own name there, or even with me, my screen name is my email name, people could recognize me, and I do work for other people, so I have to go in and remove, make it a non-public. With my other computer. So you might really want that, though, if you're trying to attract distant relatives, that are searching the same family lines, you might actually want that. You can actually go into the settings and make all of your searches non-public, or all your clippings non-public. This option is also available at Genealogy Bank also. Findagrave is a free website. I'm sure many of you are aware of it. And when you're doing searches on Ancestry.com, they will often include Findagrave results. If there is a Y shown, there will be text in the memorial. It might be just something about military service or just a transcript of the gravestone, but many people are putting the information for their ancestors or their family members in the text of the memorial. So if you see the Y, you can click on that and the image of the gravestone, and go directly to the Findagrave website to view the memorial. And then if there's text there, you can copy and paste it into your notes again. Always remember to give credit to Findagrave and to the publication if it's mentioned, and to the person who posted it if they give that information. There are over 190 million memorials created since 1995. And I know I have signed up to be a volunteer and I've added some memorials, but you could also volunteer, add memorials, photos, text. Some people even put census information, family stories, even images of death certificates and things like that. It's really quite an amazing site for free. So we're doing good on time. This is another free option. There are many library projects, and this one happens to be the New York State Historical newspaper site, and it allows you to search with various criteria, but it's structured more like the newspapers.com website, where it gives you the keyword searching. And you can click on the name of the county in the state, or you can go right up to the search option and it will take you to the next page. It is a little bit clunky, but I was teaching a class at Carmel Foundation a few years ago, and one of the attendees who had never done newspaper research found her father's obituary in just a few minutes. It's pretty easy. So this is an example of a random search I did for a John Barrick, and granted, it's not a very common name. If I had John Smith, I would really have to narrow my research. This one allows you to filter by words within 5 words of each other, or change it, change the criteria a little bit. You're probably familiar with that kind of tool if you do a lot of library research. And since this was created as a library project, I think that's why you're seeing this option. Notice I didn't put quotes this time around the name because of this filtering ability. I entered in January 1, 1900 through December 31st, 1900 as my date range. And again, if it was a common name, I could narrow it by the name of the newspaper, by the name of the county, and by the name of the city. So it's giving you an example of what the whole page looks like and highlighting what information is on the page that you search for. And I got 10 results for this John Barrick. And then you can select by the date of publication and also where the newspaper was published. Here is the full page. And I'm showing that because you can actually download the whole page as a PDF or as a PNG. It shows you where on the page that the article is located. You can click the item if you like. And this example is in your handout as well. Notice that the title of the article is Funeral Held for Mr. Barrick. And in the top line, it has his name, but you might be able to see that there's actually 2 middle initials. So if I had put the name in quotes, it might not find it, but using that within 5 words really helped out in this situation. So I think we're kind of ahead of time, 7:36. I mentioned at the beginning that libraries often help genealogists find their newspaper articles or other research requests. This website in Chemung, New York, has an obituary index that they have created to help their patrons. And it's showing on their webpage actually sections that you can go into time range that you can search for your particular interest. They also have a video link. It's like a 2-minute video explaining how to do the search, how to order the copy. It does cost a little bit of money, but I have found it to be very reasonable, and it sure beats trying to find it and then, getting really frustrated. Just go right to the library and see what they have, to offer. Another website that is in your handout is called Random Acts of Genealogy Kindness. This website has been around for a long time, and it is powered by volunteers. It was down for a while, but it's back up now, and they also have international locations. The idea is that you go on the site, try to find a researcher in an area where your ancestors or your family members live, and then you contact that volunteer, and it's generally a free service. Sometimes they might charge you for, the hard copies if you need them, or some will charge mileage. At this point in time, many of the libraries aren't open for the public, so they may be creating a list of things that they can do once they can get back in public again. It's a very good service. I actually was on this website for a while, and then some of the offerings that I had went online, and so no one was contacting me anymore. But yeah, do try that. It's a great option. Something kind of new is funeral homes are posting more and more obituaries online. And if you've done a Google search for an obituary, you probably are aware of a website called legacy.com. It's a basically free website that has obituaries from funeral homes and also newspapers. Once in a while, they will direct you to a paid site, but I've had fairly good luck in researching at Legacy. You could also Google funeral homes in quotes with the name of the city. And I put city in quotes because it might be a 2-word city, like Las Vegas, which is in your handout. I found a really nice website that kind of impressed me because they not only had the word search, the name search, but they also had word search. And you can also just look at the obituaries for a certain month. So, of course, I had to test out what would you get if you did a word search rather than the name of the deceased person. You could search for the name of the children or some other variable information. I searched for Josephine Kyles, and up came the obituary for her father. Her mother, well, at least his wife, is still living, but had she predeceased him, she might also come up in the search results, or another family member. So on that thinking, if you put in a name of a child or some other variable information, you actually might get more results than just the one that you're looking for. I do next of kin research, so this could be a real time saver for me. And that's just a very nice service that they're doing now because, as you know, newspapers are charging quite a lot of money for families to put an obituary research, an obituary in the newspaper. FindMyPast is a great website for doing British research, but you can also do newspaper research at FindMyPast. They have British newspapers, Irish newspapers, and they also have US and Canadian newspapers. In Canada, it includes the Western provinces and Newfoundland. YouTube, there's a YouTube video that was actually done by FindMyPast. It's about a 30-minute video, and it will take you through the steps on how to do the newspaper research, because as you've noticed already, the websites are not the same. Their search screens are different, and this one is even different still. And you will also encounter the OCR computer gibberish, as I call it, because that's the way, it recognizes characters. Could be the newspapers aren't in that great a condition also. So here's my last example. And Sarah, did you want to say something at this point?
Sure, we have a few questions. So if you'd like to finish up your last bit here, why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we'll get to the questions.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So I have two more examples, and this one is another project, and it's the California Newspaper Collection. This is an important website for not only California research, but also for all of you who may have relatives who came west to California at an early date, because they have San Francisco and Los Angeles newspapers from the 1800s. So it's a very good one to know about. Also, you will encounter the OCR readout of the article. It has the original newspaper article on the right-hand side, and then it will also give you the text on the left-hand side. So right away you can notice, some obvious errors. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, but you can see why the computer possibly had problems reading that. There's a little bleeding in the irregularity in the word Brooklyn. But don't let that discourage you. You can actually volunteer to make corrections, especially to the names of people that you might, other people might want to find. I have volunteered to make corrections because it just kind of drives me crazy. Some of the misspellings and that. I noticed on this website, though, and a couple of others, that there are some people that's all they do is just go in and do newspaper corrections, and they've got thousands. They're the top indexer, or not indexer, but corrector, I guess you might say. And again, you can copy and paste this information to your notes or your Word documents. This last example is the obituary for my great-grandfather, Henry Chesso. And this is an example of secondary information, remembering that newspaper articles and obituaries do contain secondary information. It might not be complete. Sometimes there were inaccuracies, so we need to read them carefully. He was a retired painter, which was amazing to me because my grandfather was also a painter. He was a professional interior decorator, and Henry was his father. And so I suppose he learned his skills from his father. His wife was Bertha Worm, his first wife. And after she died, it says that he married Anna, a lady named Anna, who survives him. And it says there were other survivors, 5 daughters, gives their names and their locations, and 2 sons, their names and their locations. But he actually had 3 sons. The other not mentioned was my mysterious grandfather. The family lore, when I was able to finally contact this family, was that my grandfather had died. They thought he died before 1920 because they found his tools by the railroad track and no one heard from him again. So they assumed something bad had happened to him. This location was not far from Chicago and, all of the crime, element in that vicinity. So they just thought something had happened. But meanwhile, my grandfather had come to California and met my grandmother, and now here I am. So in summary, remember, use keywords, vary your search criteria, and check for various websites, and do check back often because newspapers are added all the time. More information comes along regularly. And so now I'd like to take a question from our audience now, and I see Gail's ready, or Sarah. What is our question?
So we have a couple of questions, and this has come in a couple of times. And it says you mentioned a handout, but you don't seem to be aware of it. No worries. We are going to send it out to everyone who registered for this event this evening. So for all of you on the line, you will receive that handout. And then your first question, if we scroll all the way back and we remember at the very beginning of this presentation, they would like to know, how do they navigate at the site listed to get the that very first obit page lookup? So let's give Junel just a moment to get back to the beginning of her presentation.
So do you want to go to the, is this the website you're speaking of? Online death indexes, deathindexes.com. This link is in your handout. And you can navigate to any state, and it will open up, the options that are available. When we clicked on Michigan, for example, it gave us Michigan death records and indexes that were available at Family Search, at Ancestry. It lets us know if it requires payment or if they're free. There's also a death index that's available at the Michigan Department of Health. In addition to the obituaries that we looked at, there's also some other sites that you can visit. Ancestry says that there's one that's free with registration that has 140,000 entries, and it tells you which counties that it includes. And then if you are interested in a particular county, you can go down the list to see what's available by county. And so we all know that in genealogy research, it's location, location, location. And by looking at Family Search Wiki or Ancestry's Red Book or some of the other tools that are out there, even Google, you can find out the name of the county because that's the jurisdictional level that a lot of these websites, like your genealogical websites are arranged by county and so forth. So you can choose which website to go to. And because I'm not online, I cannot actually click the link here, but this is a demonstration of what you can do at these various, in these various directories. And if that doesn't answer your question, do you have a follow-up question?
Sure. So if the person who asked that question, if you do have a follow-up, just please put that into the Q&A and we'll get to it. Now, your next question, Junel, says, how do I navigate at the site listed to get the obit page lookup? I'm sorry. If no obituary exists, how might one find the cemetery where the deceased is buried?
So So you were looking in for an obituary for the purpose of finding the cemetery. Is that right? You could come to this website. There are many cemeteries listed here. And also you could check, you probably already checked Findagrave. You sound like an experienced researcher. Where else could you look? It sounds like an old, like it might be an old cemetery. There are lists of cemeteries at the Genealogical Society websites, and also there's one called Gen Web that is also kind of an older style website. It's very popular when we first went online, and I don't know if some of them are being maintained, but I do know that there are some cemeteries and some cemetery listings of people who are buried there on the Gen Web site. So you would Google Gen Web for the county where your person passed away or was living the last time you had record of him or her, and try to find it that way. Oops, I went ahead. So is there another?
There is another question. Hang on just a second. They're asking if you could provide the link for the SLC website as well.
The Salt Lake City, are you talking about the family search?
I'm not sure if they're talking about family search or a different one. The family search was put into the chat, but that'll also be in your handout. So do you know of another Salt Lake City search they could be thinking about?
Okay, well, you could perhaps go to this deathindexes.com, go to Utah, that's the state, and then you would drill down to Salt Lake City. That might be a special entry on that page for Utah, and since I'm not online, I can't do that, but it's fairly straightforward because it is a directory, and you'll probably see several things on the Utah site. If you're speaking of familysearch.org, that link is in your handout. And when I found this Michigan link to this collection, I went back and Googled, and I Googled, the keywords Michigan obituaries family search, because then I knew it was on family search, and it brought me right to the collection link. So you could try it that way too, Salt Lake City obituary family search, something like that.
Great, thank you. Your next question says, how is this search of Michigan obituaries different from a quote unquote regular search on the familysearch.org site?
Oh, that's a great question, because it takes you right into that specific database. And then you're only searching within that database for an obituary. If you go onto a search records in the familysearch.org website, you're going to, get results for several different categories. Perhaps they would be relevant to your search, and perhaps not. So by going into that specific database, you're only dealing with obituaries and not with other items. So if you don't find it at first, try different combinations of search terms. And that goes with Ancestry and any of the other databases that you're searching also. It's really good to go to the catalog and find a specific database, only search in that database, and then write this down, in your research log, that is the database that you searched and what you found or what you didn't find. And so we are so used to doing kind of a, throw it out there, throw the words out there, either on Google or on Ancestry, and see what comes up. But, by searching in a very specific database, then uh, sort of the limitations, what have I looked at? I've looked at, from 1910 to 1990, maybe I should look for something that's in 1991 or something prior. It's always just good to look at an individual database.
Great. And I just want to remind our audience that now's your chance to ask Junel a question. So just find that Q&A icon down there at the bottom of your Zoom control bar and type in any question you might have. Now, your next question says, is there an index of newspaper collections in the United States by state or area?
No, not that I know of. There might be some books that have attempted to put that together. It's kind of a moving target these days because they're, it's going to be ever changing. There's more and more coming online all the time. And of course, the time range, the year range, the coverage is going to change.
I could jump in on that question a little bit.
Thank you.
Library of Congress has a site called Chronicling America, and it lists newspapers that are published in locations all over the United States and what time periods. They're not all digitized and they're not all available to browse online at the Library of Congress site, but you can at least find out what newspapers were published.
That's a great idea. So does it give you links to any of the sites?
I think it gives you links to ones that are digital available and have been digitized. But the rest of it consists of lists of newspapers that were extant at one point or another in various places all over the United States.
That's good to know. Thank you. That's good.
All right. Well, your next question says, any websites for researching immigrant records through Ellis Island and other ports?
Well, you might try Steve Morse. His website, one step, I think it's called. Gail?
Yeah, the one step, Stephen Morse, STEPHENMORSE.org. And he has a bunch of one-step procedures for searching Ellis Island and the predecessor to Ellis Island, which was Castle Gardens, as well as many other things to search that are on other subjects.
And then there's a question. It says, can Gail repeat the section of the LOC?
It's called Chronicling America. I don't have the website at my fingertips, but the specific portion of the Library of Congress that deals with the newspapers is called Chronicling America. Oops, you've got a.
And it looks like Junel might be trying to bring that up for us.
But
So,
yeah.
well, let's hang on just a second while she tries to get that up.
If I can spell it right.
There we go. First one down.
This one, American.
Yeah, anyway.
Historic American newspapers.
Yes.
And this one has digitized newspapers. Should we go there?
I haven't been on the site for a while, I have to confess, but if it digitizes like this, but they also, if you go more to, sort of like the home part of that part of the Library of Congress website, it also just gives you lists of newspapers that exist. by state.
For all digitized newspapers.
Well, and I mean, the newspaper directory over on the, yeah, there will just give you a list of newspapers, including ones that are not yet digitized.
And you can search.
You can search by state
Station.
and time period. And
Oh,
so they have a ways to go with Arizona.
let's do well, let's do Utah.
Yeah, somebody wanted Utah.
Utah, Salt Lake County, I think, Lake City. And it also gives you the opportunity to enter keywords, which is really cool. And so it gave me 7 results. Some 1895, that's pretty early. 1912, 2011 to current. So there's a fair coverage there. LDS Church News as well. So yeah, I didn't mention like ethnic newspapers or anything like that, but there might be some of that in this collection. Good.
Anyway, it's worth exploring, I think, to try and
Definitely.
what
Yeah.
newspapers are available.
So,
I think some county websites also, county history websites also have lists of newspapers that were published in their specific counties over
oh,
time.
right.
They
The
may not be
library,
digital.
what do they call it? The union list.
Yeah, yeah. But even just just on county websites, they will, in County History Society websites, they'll frequently have a category of newspapers that were published there.
And here's another question. It said, would you recommend joining a genealogical society?
Well, of course, it's the end thing.
Oh.
All right. We do have a couple of other questions, though. It says, I think a family member changed his name. What is the search method to find a variation of the name?
Well, if it's a variation, then that might just, be some creative searching. But, name changes can occur for many different reasons. Immigration might be one, where they have shortened the name. So you might, in one case where I was looking for a next of kin, I found out that the family changed the name to Michael's from, had a ski on the end of it. It was a long name, like an East German name or something, had SKI at the end, and they had dropped that, and then they just, so you might look at a shorter version of the name. And I think there's a story that a genealogist told me early on, and you may have heard this story as well, about you could translate it, you could shorten it, or, they could have changed it entirely, to Smith or something so that they could blend in. I'm not too well versed on name changes, but I do know that in the early days that you had to publish or name change in the California Digital Newspaper Collection. If you do a search for name change, for example, you'll see several that were done by the state legislature at an early date. Nowadays, you have to go through court to do a formal name change. And some of those are just because they want to have the name of the family, the step family possibly that they're living with. And that also requires that it be published in the newspaper, but you can there were also name changes that weren't done formally at all. Like in the case of my grandfather, for instance, he chose a totally different name, very, very common name, Robert Wilson, born 1 January 1900. My dad said that's bogus, and sure enough, that Robert Wilson never existed. You do have what I did and what we have to do if we're confronted with that situation is we do have to rule out all of the possibilities, including those that aren't variations, So I wish you luck with that one. Changes in names are kind of difficult sometimes.
All right. Your next question says, I'm seeking details of a young man killed in Chicago, 1900 to 1906. No death certificate on file, no local burial, multiple options for his name, but I searched them all. Is there a way to find police records for Chicago?
I believe there's coroner's inquests that survive for that time period. You could try the Cook County Clerk's office and see what they have. It may entail writing a letter to the clerk's office. So you would Google, it's either the Cook County Clerk or the Cook County Clerk of Court, something like that, and you'll get to the website. And last time I checked, they did have some forms that you could request. You could do a request, and it was a mail request. You can't do an email or not a phone call either. You actually, or go in person today, but in the past. So that's one option. I do believe, so that could be, did you try the newspaper for that information, for that incident? That's another possibility. But using your keywords again, try and figure out. Also, family members. Are there any family stories that could have been published? Obviously, you know something about the family. That's all I can think of.
Well, thank you, Junel. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. Looks like we have another question that's come in. It says, any hints on securing records from pre-1906 in San Francisco for births and deaths?
That is a good question. There were some registers that were kept locally in the counties. And perhaps some of them have survived. Now I know that San Francisco, because of the earthquake, that some things were lost. There is a book, it's about San Francisco, and the title of it evades me right now, but there is a book published about the sources, supplemental sources and substitute sources for the records in San Francisco. And if you get a hold of that, it's really good. And I'll have to Google it to share that name with you. It has something to do with ashes because, of course, San Francisco burned. And there are some resources that are available. You might also check the San Francisco Public Library if you haven't already done so, and see what is in their catalog. I'm sure they have that book for sure. And they may have some other resources as well. There used to be a really good website for San Francisco resources, and you probably already found that one.
We have another local question. It says, is there a way to find death records for Santa Cruz County online period late 1890 to 1920?
Yeah, okay. Let's first take that question We'll do both of them. California, San Francisco. And let's just see what's in Family Search Catalog. So we have some court records. We have some guardianship, vital records. We have 1900 births. I don't know if it's got more than 1900, but 1900 births and marriage licenses. 1865 to 1904, I don't know how much that is covering. 1865 to 1869. Looks like the deaths are better covered than the births. But all throughout California before 1906, you know, it's sketchy. Even in the counties that didn't have fires, because it wasn't mandatory that the births be recorded. A lot of the home births, the midwives or the doctors, when they went back to town, they didn't record it. If the parents didn't record it, then it's not a record. Here's a thought though. There are what they call delayed birth certificates in California that were recorded later on. If a person needed insurance or Social Security or for some other legal reason, they might file an application for a delayed birth certificate. And this might be for a birth, you know, that occurred years earlier. And along with that, if you can find those, you can actually, I'm thinking of something right now, you can actually find that there's people who witnessed the births, there's school records that they use for evidence, there's other like marriage licenses and other legal documents that they use for evidence for this delayed birth certificate. And I'm gonna go out now of this website briefly because I know this collection is on Family Search, but birth records. California. When I said delayed, that's what prompted me to remember this. Okay, you can browse through these images, but don't let that throw you. It wants me to sign in. See, I've already been there tonight, but it wants me to sign in. Okay, there are some birth records here for various counties in California. And unfortunately, I don't see San Francisco, but I know San Joaquin has birth records from an early date in the birth registers. So if you haven't already come here, it's showing you the cover of the book. You can come here. It's not an actual birth certificate because there weren't birth certificates in those years, but here is the information that you may be seeking: the name of the child, the place of birth, the date of birth, a male, he's white, he was legitimate, the father's name, the residence, and the birthplace. And I think this probably goes on to the next page as well. So there's a lot of digitized information. Not all of the counties were wanted to have Family Search put their records on microfilm, but a lot of them did. So that's why you don't have all of the counties in California represented. And all across the United States, the Family History Library sent people out to do mission work, you know, to do the microfilming in these various areas. So that's an example of birth certificates for early California that you might be able to find. Unfortunately, in this case, not San Francisco, because it's not one of the counties that in this was available. So, and then the next question was, I forgot already, having to do with Santa Cruz. So maybe we want to go back into family search.
Sure, and they're looking for death records for Santa Cruz County online period late 1890 to 1920s.
And we want death certificates now?
Correct. Death certificates. And then another attendee said that they just found obituaries from Santa Cruz Evening News for 25 November 1910.
And where did they find it?
Probably newspapers.com. They have good coverage of the Santa Cruz Sentinel and predecessors.
They just found it tonight, or they found it before and now they want to find the death certificate?
I'm not sure that those two are related. I think that person was just being helpful.
Okay.
News, and they did say that they found it via Ancestry, and then they got to newspapers.com. So Gail, ding, 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 1 point for you.
Are we done with questions?
No,
we are.
we're still.
It looks like there's still 1 or 2 left.
There are. So she's working away at Santa Cruz County.
I am going to go into family search. I just want family search. Yeah, I don't want. Go back to, that website. Okay. So, what I generally do when I have a location that I want to see what is available, I'll just, go into the catalog and type in the location. In this case, Santa Cruz County. I don't want to go to Santa Cruz City because the death records would be arranged or maintained by the county. And of course, if the county office was open, we could just go there. And so vital records, notice that there's also a few other categories here. Vital records, obituaries, probate. If you go to the courthouse there in Santa Cruz, you could go to the clerk's office and perhaps find a probate record for that person. This was available in the vital records section. We have some births. There's an index to death records. We also have death records. So you found an obituary, but of course we wouldn't know the book and page of the death records. So we first want to go there and check the index. It does say that the index is online, so you could search the name there. I'm not seeing, yes. So it looks like there would be an image available. So if I search the collection, we'll just do our favorite search model, John Smith. And this was in the late 1800s. And this is giving me all of California, so, or a lot of California anyway. It does show San Francisco there. Don't know what years are covered, but okay, so birthplace, I don't know birthplace. Death, Santa Cruz. That's for birth. Okay, let's see if there's a John Smith who died in Santa Cruz from 1890 to 1900. No results. So is this our problem? Maybe they're not indexed online, and you would have to go to the actual, let's go to the actual book. Go back another screen. Okay, index to deaths. Go to this camera icon and bring up the index and just mark that. And it will tell you the book and page where the, should tell you, no, it just gives you the date. So without a book and page, you would have to go to the actual book and then go through the dates, basically. Here's index, here's a register. So it might be in the register if it's in the late 1890s. So go here. And of course, it's going to start A, B for as many entries that they are for the A's. And they're chronologically listed because that's the way that the information came in. And there's no corresponding death certificate because they didn't actually do certificates. It mentioned certificate, but I doubt it.
Well, Junel, why don't I give you another question, a much
Okay.
more recent question. And I think this is a question a lot of people might have. It says, is there an index to search more current California death records? For example, 2000 onward.
The closest you're going to get to that is the Social Security Death Index. And it doesn't always give you the location. You can go to the individual jurisdictions, and perhaps there is local information through their recorder's website or their vital statistics or court website. A lot of times the courts will have, the probate indexes that are online, if you're lucky. There's many jurisdictions that are coming online with the more recent information. But California, for instance, their index ends, I think it's 1997, something like that. So yeah, the question 2000 onward, you're looking more at the Social Security Death Index for the United States, that is.
And this will be the last question for the evening. It says an ancestor appeared in an 1800 census in his Pennsylvania town, but not the 1810 census. We've assumed that he might have died, but Pennsylvania is very stingy with free searchable records. His sons continued on, so we know the family was still there. Any ideas for finding death records from that period?
Probably, this is Pennsylvania. This is probably going to be, if they owned land, which a lot of them did, it would be an orphan's court record or where the person died, someone had to go in and, manage the affairs for the sake of the minor children. Could be a deed. And I know that is a little, complicated in some ways in Pennsylvania, but those records are available online at Family Search. And if the person passed away, their land should be shown as going to either their sons or daughters or to their wife as a life estate. And so there should be some track record. That is if the person owned land. Sometimes a person would deed their land to their family members prior to their death. If they were not feeling well, they might do that beforehand. My great-grandfather in San Jose actually did that the day before he died. When I finally found that deed, he had deeded it to his wife. So he must have known he was not going to make it. So he deeded that property beforehand. I would always look in the deeds. We really have to sometimes, dig deeply into the old records to find out what was going on, because that is an early time period and there really aren't a lot of vital records during that time period, unless you're in Massachusetts or, in the Northeast there are. So Pennsylvania, unfortunately, you can also, if you haven't already, tried to find that obituary. Sometimes things are recorded years later. So I'll just share this with you, that sometimes when a person passes away and they had land, there will be an affidavit or some type of document that is recorded later on. So I would always, check that courthouse records and see what you can find. Probate, of course, and deeds. Also check the wife's records. Did she survive, or was she deceased prior? Check for her information as well. There may be something mentioned about him in her records. I had a case that I was doing a lineage application, and I was able to prove a relationship based upon a deed that was recorded. It was about 25 years after the man died, but it mentioned his wife, who had a widow's third that was eventually passed down to one of her children. And so it ended up in the property deeds many years later. So broaden your search and try to do some of that courthouse research.
Great. Junel, thank you so much for sharing everything with us this evening. And I think, Gail, you have some closing comments for us.
Yes, I want to thank Janelle as well. I can't wait to put your ideas into practice. As Sarah mentioned, Ms. Davidsen has kindly permitted us to distribute her handout to you, and it will also be posted in the Santa Cruz Genealogical website, which is easily reached from the library's homepage by clicking on the research tab and then going to genealogy and scrolling down until you find the Genealogical Society of Santa Cruz County and click on that, and that takes you to our homepage. And lecture notes and handouts can be accessed there. When you visit the website, you will also find the membership application form. If you're not already a member of the GSSCC, we cordially invite you to join our society. Thank you for being with us this evening. Please join us again on the first Tuesday of next month, May 4th at 7 p.m. for Dr. Tracy Bliss's presentation about Evergreen Cemetery, Reversing a Cherished Myth. To register for next month's program, all you need to do is enter your first and last name and your email address at the Santa Cruz Library's calendar page for the event. And then down at the bottom, yes, you put your first name, last name, email, and then see the little box where it says yes. If you click there, that will allow the Genealogical Society of Santa Cruz County to send you more information about various events that you might be interested in attending. Once you click the blue register button at the very bottom, you will receive the Zoom information for the next program. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and we hope to see you next month. Good night.